Hi, welcome to our podcast with Steve Hewitt Ministries. I'm your host, Steve Hewitt, and today I'm really excited because we're going to talk about Chapter 3 of my book, Focused Christianity, and Nick Nicholaou is going to be back with us as he was last week. And this week we're going to talk about Chapter 3, which is really saying to God, use me. And Nick and I have already spent 30 minutes talking about this before we started the podcast, but hopefully we can reshare some of that stuff. If you don't know what the book is, haven't seen the book, would be interested in the book, you simply go to www.tinyurl.com/Steve Hewitt Ministries. And if I do everything right, you'll see that at the bottom of the screen right now, so you'll be able to check out the book. Let me bring Nick in and we'll get started.
Well, hi, Steve. It's great to be with you again.
It's just great to have you back. Okay, Chapter 3, use me. I think we explained in my very first podcast that use me is simply one of the ways I express my mission statement. Every night before I go to bed, I pray, God, use me. Every morning when I get up, I pray, God, use me. Now, on big decisions like, should I buy this house? Should I go be this church's pastor? That's seeking God's will, and that's a little different than just waking up saying, Lord, I don't know. Just use me. I want to be your vessel to be used in any way. I want to start out by sharing a great example of my wife. Of course, the greatest example in the book is when she got cancer. And it didn't shake her. We prayed, God, well, she's got cancer. We ask you to use it. If it's going to be to take her home, then she's ready, and we'll work on that. If it's going to be for something else, and it was for something else, 4 years, she's cancer-free. I'm living in Florida in an RV, the traveling turtle house, and here we are doing a podcast. None of those things would have happened if she hadn't got cancer. Well, recently we had a great example. She's got a job. She's a receptionist at a physical therapy office. Well, we're praying, God, use her. And also we're wondering, how's God going to use her? She doesn't get to talk to the patient. She doesn't really know the physical therapist. Well, the other day she came home and she said, you're not going to believe this. They came to me and said, Gina, we want to tell you something. We're going to shift all of the clients that are difficult, that are complicated, that are angry, that complain a lot. We're going to shift them to you and let you handle them. And she's like, for heaven's sakes, what, do you guys hate me or something? They go, no, you do such a great job with grace. You have such empathy with our clients. We've observed that now the last 6 months, and we find that fascinating. And so we're going to give you an opportunity to use that even more. Now, for us, we thought that's fantastic. We shared that with some friends, and they're like, oh, we're going to pray for your wife that they change that, give her, get her out of that situation. And we're like, no, we're sharing this as a praise. I mean, we want to be used by God. We're willing to be whatever God needs us to be, and that's why we pray that. You had some examples as well.
Steve, that's a great story. And you and your wife are neat examples of how to live these principles that you've written about. For me, every day I try to start the day sometime in the morning, probably not like you. I don't do it right when I wake up. But early in the morning, I ask for wisdom. And I ask for words that are as apples of gold and settings of silver, which is out of Proverbs 25:11, so that I can say whatever he wants me to well. And then I ask that he work in me and through me with his gifts and fruit. And then I try to be available. Whatever comes up, I try to see if he's in that. Jesus modeled being interruptible. He had agendas. He had things on his itinerary, and as he's going along, somebody comes up and touches the hem of his garment.
Oh, yes.
And he doesn't say, hey, I'm busy. He models being interruptible, and so I try to do that too. I try to be sensitive to those around me, whether they're people I interact with, maybe at the grocery store or wherever, or maybe it's a homeless person who looks like they're hungry. I don't like the idea of giving cash to homeless people, and we could have a whole discussion about that, but I do try to meet their need. So, for instance, one time my wife and I were sitting at McDonald's at a table at the window eating, and I noticed that there was a guy out in the parking lot going through the trash cans. He looked homeless, and he was probably hungry, looking for food. So I told Grace what I had in mind to do, and then I went outside and I said to him, hey, it looks like maybe you're hungry. And he told me he was, and I said, well, I'll go inside and I'll buy you anything you want. You just tell me, what do you want? And he gave me an order. He said, really, you do that for me? Yeah, I'll be glad to. and he gave me an order for maybe a half a dozen Big Mac Happy Meals and desserts and all that. And I know it wasn't something he could eat today, but maybe it would feed him for 2 or 3 days. And
Yeah,
so I was glad to do it. And so
that's good.
that was me being available to something that God obviously put in my path.
You know, the 5 principles I share, the part about just asking God to use me was number one. It's the core of everything, and I find it to be vital. So many times, so chapter 6 of the book is like, I think, 12 examples of me driving Uber, and at least what I thought were examples of God using me. There's a lot more. I mean, there's been hundreds. I've prayed with hundreds that, you know, I'm not even sure the first time I ever prayed with somebody I'm allowed to do that as an Uber driver. I went back to look at the 12 examples I give, and one of the ones that was so out of there, so far out, and this has never happened to me before. I picked up this guy, and he was a big guy and young man and a little scary. I'll just be honest with you. Probably my own prejudices or whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, let's go. And I'm driving him. And as I start to drive him, I'm also had just gone through a segment of constantly taking people to a particular street where there was a drug house. And I was just discouraged by it. I almost quit driving Uber just because I was taking people. When I picked them up, they were stoned. And I'd take them there, and they're buying drugs. And I don't want to be a part of this. When I looked at the address, it was on that street. And I'm like, oh, no. And then immediately, this never happened to me before. I know some people do this every day. But I heard God, not audibly like you said last week. I felt God say, I have a message for this young man. And the message was, young man, let's say his name was John. John, I love you, and I have a plan for you, but this isn't it. And I'm like, oh man, I can't tell this guy that message. And we drove about 5 miles, and then we hit that street. And we went on that street, and there was a storefront that I knew was where the drugs were bought. There was nobody at that store. And I'm like, well, that's good. We went about 3 blocks more and turned into an apartment complex. And I hear God telling me, say this. I couldn't say it. I'm like, it sounds so weird. He's not doing anything I know of. What? So he got out and went to this apartment, and I didn't say it. And I felt terrible because I'm like, man, I never felt that before. So I started driving home, got about a mile, and an Uber went off again. Went back to that same address. And I picked this young man up. And the interesting thing was there were 4 or 5 people standing outside this apartment complex, just standing there, kind of spaced out around the neighborhood, no one moving. And so he got in, and I said, I'm taking you back home. And he goes, no, I got a different address for you. So we went to this different address, and I'm following the map Uber gives me, and I'm like, okay, God, you gave me obviously another chance. This is important. I tell this guy this message. And we get to that house, and he goes, wait for me. This is a stop. We pulled into this house, and there was another big guy standing in the front yard, and it was overgrown. It was a broken-down house, and there were 3 broken, crashed cars next to the house. He simply walked up to the guy. They fist bumped each other, and that guy went in the house. He went to one of those broken down cars, got in the car, in the back seat of this wrecked car, was there for maybe 30, 45 seconds, and came out with a football-sized package that was wrapped in a trash bag. And he went and got in my car. He didn't talk to this guy. And then he gave me an address, and it was to go back to the apartment where I had just picked him up at. I'm witnessing that most likely this was a drug deal. You know, he wasn't buying an individual package. He was buying for the supplier. It was a big package. And then he gets on the phone. He goes, I'm sorry, you guys said $1,300. No one told me $1,350. So I just gave you what I was told. And he hung the phone up. So I'm like, oh my gosh, now I know how much he paid for the drugs he bought. And now we're going back to this place. I've had no conversation with this guy, and I'm pretty scared of where he just took me. And so as we're going back to this apartment, we get really close. And I'm like, God, you got a message. I got to tell this man. So I'm about 3 blocks from where I'm dropping him off. And I said, hey, John, I have a question for you. He goes, what is that? I said, do you believe in God? He goes, yes, sir, I do. And I said, well, I know this is going to sound a little strange, and honestly, it's the first time it's ever happened to me, but I'm very close to God as well, and he's given me a message to give you. Do you mind if I share that with you? And he goes, yes, sir. And I said, well, God's message for you is he still loves you, and he's got a plan for you, but this isn't it. And he said, thank you, sir. Got out of the car and went in the apartment. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So then I drove by that little store again, 3 blocks away, and it was empty. I went to see a friend of mine who's a bail bondsman, and he's like, I told him the story, and he's like, oh my gosh, that is something's happening right now. And I'm like, what's that? And he goes, they just discovered a dead body in that little store, and that's why it's shut down. And so evidently they moved the drug house 3 blocks away to this guy. And this guy, I'm assuming, was probably a Christian. And God wanted to know that, look, you're not doing what I want you to do. I got a different plan for you. So you never know. I wake up with incredible excitement. Now I get in the car and I drive and nothing happens. I don't know what's happening. And I'm like, Lord, did I serve you today? Did you use me today? Did that person just need to get out of the rain and get a safe drive? I don't know. We don't always know what God's doing.
Well, and sometimes we're concerned about doing what we sense that he wants us to do. We're afraid to do it, and it could be for a myriad of reasons. Oftentimes, it's because we're not walking closely with him, and so our internal reaction is, how could he use me?
Yeah.
And it's been interesting that some friends and I have been talking recently about that, and about the fact that when we confess our sins, he's faithful to forgive our sin. And it's right away. But what we want to do oftentimes is put ourselves almost in like a little purgatory. Like, well, we got to feel guilty about it for 2 days before we can feel like he will use us again.
Yeah.
But really, he'll use us right away. Confess your sin and trust him. That's the faith that he's called us to.
Yeah. And I just recently, even though I knew this forever, I just recently was reminded that when Jesus taught us how to pray, pray daily, thanking him for his bread, our daily bread. And then he goes and forgive us our trespasses or sins as we forgive those who trespass against us. He included that in our daily prayer. Of course, once we're saved, then grace and mercy has wiped the slate free. We're positionally sanctified. But we do fail. And when we fail, it's very easy to feel, well, God can't use me. And sometimes we feel God can't use us because we're old and we're fat, or we have glasses, or we stutter, or we're big chickens. You never know. And I was preparing for this podcast. I was talking with my wife, and all of a sudden I remembered the name Charlotte Elliott. And Charlotte Elliott lived a long time ago in England. Her brothers and her family, I think maybe her dad, were all ministers of the gospel. But she had back then what they called consumption, which is a type of tuberculosis. It basically paralyzed her. She was sick all of her life, off and on. And many times she couldn't get out of bed. She couldn't feed herself. She certainly couldn't do any chores. She felt she was a burden to her family. Well, as everybody in her family was serving God, and she had a brother that was raising money in order to start a school for ministers' daughters, because in England there was no public school. So everybody had to fund some sort of schooling. So he was raising money, and she started praying, Lord, I want to do something. I want to help in this cause. What can I do? I'm laying here. Someone's got to come brush my hair. Someone's got to brush my teeth. I'm getting sponge baths. I'm worthless. What in the world can I do for you? I want you to use me, which is the key of what we're talking about in this chapter. And in the middle of the night, she started getting these words. And so she couldn't wait for someone to wake up because she couldn't write them down. And so when someone woke up, she goes, quick, get a pencil and start writing this down. And she dictated a poem that was then published in I think it was called Poems of Disability, from people like her that were disabled. And the poem went something like, just as I am, without one plea, O Lamb of God, I come to thee. And you know the whole verses and everything. And she wrote, now it wasn't put to music till later on, but she wrote the words that literally millions of people have come to Christ listening as they heard it. And think about her, just as I am. Just as I am. I'm paralyzed. I feel worthless. I don't know how you can use me, but just as I am, I come. I know many of us responded to that hymn, just as I am, because we were thinking of the sins that we carry. But God can use any of us, and God can use all of us. Okay, Nick, I think we're already out of time. This was a good fast one, but I love the fact that when we're together, time does fly so much. I appreciate you so much. The things you share with me. We share much more, folks, than actually we can get into the 15-minute podcast. We normally talk about an hour, and then we try to do this really quick. But thank you so much, Nick, for being here. Thank you for watching today. I hope that you're blessed. I hope that you let God use you. And I hope if you feel God can't use you, you're going to be inspired that he can, because if he can use this whole thing, he can use anybody. Yeah. So thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe. Please share. Let people know about it. I'd greatly appreciate it. God bless and have a great day.